What it's like to be recruited into the Black Legion starts with a single moment of terrible clarity. The voice of Abaddon the Despoiler crawls through your mind like ice spreading through veins. I remember that voice, calling across the Eye of Terror, demanding we abandon our past and embrace his vision. For 9,000 years I served as a serf to the lunar wolves, watching their glory fade to bitter shadow. Now my flesh burns as the warp remakes it, my memories dissolve like ash in water, and my soul screams as weakness is carved away. They say the Black Legion offers freedom from the shadow of fallen primarchs. But what kind of freedom requires you to surrender everything that was ever human? Marks on my flesh are not scars, they are signatures. I remember the day my master died. Not the true day, 10,000 years past when the War Master fell upon Terra. That death belongs to history. I speak of the second death, the one I witnessed with my own eyes. The day Horus Lupercal truly vanished from the galaxy. They say a serf should never look directly upon his master, that the glory of the Astartes is not for mortal eyes to witness in full. Yet I served the Legion since before the fall, since before we fled into the screaming void that men call the Eye of Terror. I knew every ritual, every observance. I had polished the same armor for 9 millennia, watching the gold of the lunar wolves fade to a sickly pallor as our purpose rotted within us. My name was Garan Vale, though names have little meaning now. I was born on Terra, in the shadows of Unity Palace, when the Imperium still contained hope. I was selected for service at the age of 6, my hands deemed perfect for the delicate work of maintaining power armor, thin fingers, steady pulse. The Legion apothecaries enhanced me with minor augmentations, enough to extend my life but not enough to elevate me beyond useful servitude. A partial immortality, crueler than true death. 9,000 years I served, watching younger serfs age and die while I endured. My master was Decanta Sargus, once a captain in the Lunar Wolves, later a warlord who clung to the past with obsessive fervor. He was not the only one. After the War Master fell, the Legion shattered into warbands. Some embraced the path of chaos immediately, raging across the stars with their newfound freedom. Others, like my master, remained paralyzed by the loss. They built shrines to Horus, collected relics of the old Legion, and waited for the impossible return of their fallen father. Time means nothing in the Eye. Years pass like days or centuries, depending on the whims of the warp. Our warband dwelled in the remains of a grand vessel, the Vindication. Once a proud battleship of the Great Crusade, now half merged with the landscape of a daemon world. The vessel had crashed or perhaps grown roots, its metal hull fusing with the crystalline earth. From the command bridge, my master would stare out at the twisted horizon, waiting for a sign. I remember the unease that grew among the other serfs, the whispers that our master had lost his purpose. The Astartes themselves spoke less with each passing year, their oaths of vengeance against the Emperor fading into hollow rituals. We were dying, not in body but in spirit. Then came the day of the summons. We felt it before we heard it, a pressure against the skin as though the air itself had become too heavy to bear. The daemon world trembled, crystalline formations shattering across the landscape. I was polishing my master's armor in the preparation chamber when the first waves hit. A psychic pulse so powerful it knocked serfs from their feet and caused even the Astartes to stumble. Then came the voice, not spoken, not heard, but somehow present in the mind of every living being in the warband. Sons of Horus. Lunar wolves, followers of the fallen War Master. Hear me. The voice was deep, powerful, familiar yet changed. It carried authority that brooked no disobedience. My hands froze on the armor plate I had been polishing, my body suddenly cold despite the heat of the daemon world. I am Ezekiel Abaddon, first captain of our legion. The War Master is gone, the dream of the Great Crusade is ashes, the time for mourning is over. The psychic broadcast continued, echoing through our souls more than our ears. I watched as my master, the proud Decanta Sargus, fell to his knees in the center of the chamber. His face, usually stern and composed, contorted with emotions I had never seen in him. Rage, grief, and something worse, fear. The Legion as you knew it is dead, as the 16 Legion died with Horus. But I offer you rebirth. Cast off the pale shadow of the past. Burn away your weakness and doubt. Join me, and we shall forge a new Legion, a Black Legion, not bound by the failures of fathers or the chains of legacy. We shall be free as no others in this galaxy. Free to claim the vengeance that was promised, free to burn the Imperium to cinders. The voice paused, and in that silence I felt something change in the very fabric of our existence. A shifting, as though reality itself was making a choice. This is my only offer. There will not be another. Come to the vengeful spirit, kneel before me and rise reborn. Or remain in your shrines to a dead demigod and be forgotten by history. Then came the coordinates, burning themselves into the mind of every navigator and warpsmith in the warband. The location of Abaddon's flagship, the vengeful spirit, heart of the old Legion's power. My master stood slowly, his armor creaking with the movement. Without a word, he turned and strode from the chamber. The other Astartes followed, leaving us serfs alone with the echo of Abaddon's voice still reverberating in our minds. What happened next occurred with a speed that belied our millennia of stagnation. Within hours, the entire warband was mobilizing. Drop pods and gunships were prepared. Serfs scurried to gather relics and equipment. I followed my duty, readying my master's war gear as I had done countless times before. But something was different. His armor, which I had maintained in the pale green and white of the lunar wolves, was being stripped. Bare ceramite remained where once proud colors had been. "You will accompany me, Garan," my master said, speaking directly to me for the first time in centuries. His voice was hollow, as though something essential had been carved from him. "Yes, Lord," I replied, head bowed as protocol demanded. "Do you know why?" I hesitated. "A serf does not question." "No, Lord, because you remember," he said. "You remember Terra, you remember the War Master, you remember who we were before the fall. Your memory is a chain, Garan, as is mine." I did not understand his words then. I would later, when the knives came out. The journey through the warp was violent, even by the standards of the Eye. Our ships, 5 in total, tore through the immaterium like bullets through flesh, leaving trails of screaming souls in our wake. The navigators went mad, one by one, their third eyes bleeding as they guided us toward the coordinates. Serfs were sacrificed to maintain our course, their bodies hung from the command bridge, blood dripping onto parchment maps that changed even as we watched. I remained close to my master during the transit. He had demanded my presence, though he spoke little. Instead, he spent hours staring at his stripped armor, occasionally running armored fingers across the bare ceramite. Once, I caught him with a pot of green paint, nearly applying it to the shoulder pad before stopping himself. He crushed the paint pot in his fist, the green liquid running down his gauntlet like blood. "What if he is right, Garan?" he asked, not turning to look at me. "What if we have been clinging to a corpse, as the loyalists cling to their corpse emperor?" I remained silent. It was not my place to answer. "I served him," my master continued. "I fought beside the War Master when he was still called Lupercal. I saw his glory. How can I turn from that? How can Abaddon ask this of us?" Again, I said nothing, but I remember thinking that Abaddon had not asked. He had commanded, and already my master was obeying. We emerged from the warp into a region of the Eye I had never seen before. Here, the laws of physics seemed stronger, the madness of the warp held at bay by some greater power, And there, suspended in the void before us, was the vengeful spirit. Even after 10,000 years, I recognized it. The flagship of the War Master himself, the vessel from which Horus had commanded the forces of the rebellion. It had changed, as all things in the eye change. Great spines of black metal jutted from its hull. Symbols that hurt the eyes to look upon had been carved into its flanks. But it was unmistakably the vengeful spirit, its presence a wound in reality. We were not alone in our pilgrimage. Dozens of ships surrounded the great flagship, vessels bearing the colors of all the shattered remnants of the 60 Legion, the sons of Horus, the lunar wolves. The true sons, the Horus reborn, 100 warbands, each clinging to their interpretation of the War Master's legacy, all answering the call of Abaddon. Our ship docked alongside the others. As the airlock cycled, I felt a pressure building in my skull, a presence pushing against my thoughts. The vengeful spirit was alive in ways no vessel should be. It watched us as we entered its body. We were met by warriors in black armor, not the pale green of the sons of Horus, nor the white of the lunar wolves. Their armor was pure black, trimmed with gold that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their helmets bore no legion markings, no signs of rank or heritage, only the 8-pointed star that symbolized chaos undivided, the Black Legion, Abaddon's new creation. Decanta Sargus, one of the black-armored warriors, spoke, his voice distorted by his helm. The despoiler awaits you in the Strategium. Your serfs will be taken to the preparation chambers. My master nodded, his own armor still stripped bare, neither green nor black, a canvas awaiting paint. The serf Garan Vale accompanies me, he said, gesturing to where I stood behind him. The black-armored warrior tilted his head, studying me with eyes I could not see. All serfs are to be processed. It is the despoiler's command. This one has served since Terra, my master insisted. His memory is valuable. All the more reason, the warrior replied. Memories are chains. The despoiler will break them. Before my master could object further, 2 more black-armored warriors stepped forward, taking positions on either side of me. I did not resist. A lifetime of obedience does not permit resistance. We shall meet again, Garan, my master said as they led me away. In the black. I was taken through corridors that seemed to shift and breathe, the architecture of the vengeful spirit more organic than mechanical. Other serfs were being herded along the same paths, hundreds of us, drawn from the various warbands that had answered Abaddon's call. Some wept openly, fearing what awaited them. Others marched with the stoic acceptance that is the lot of those who serve the Astartes. None tried to flee. There was nowhere to run in the eye of terror. The preparation chambers were vast cathedral-like spaces that had once been launch bays for assault craft. The high ceilings were lost in shadow, occasionally illuminated by arcs of energy that danced across unseen machinery. In the center of the chamber stood rows of metal tables, each attended by figures in robes of midnight blue, dark mechanicum priests. The tech heretics who had turned from the Omnissiah to pursue forbidden knowledge. We were sorted by age and ability. The younger serfs, those with only a few centuries of service, were taken to one side of the chamber. The ancients, like myself, who had served since the Great Crusade, were led to tables directly in the center, beneath the crackling energy arcs. I was stripped of my robes, my aged body exposed to the cold air of the chamber. The marks of my service were visible on my flesh, a network of subtle augmentations inserted by Legion apothecaries 10 millennia ago that had kept me alive long past my natural span. The dark mechanicum priest who examined me clicked his mechadendrites with interest. Pre-heresy Legion augmentation, he said, his voice a blend of human speech and machine code. Rare, valuable. Will they be removed? I asked, my voice steady despite my fear. The priest made a sound that might have been laughter. Removed. No, serf. enhanced, perfected. The despoiler requires servants who will endure the transformation. Transformation? But he did not answer. Instead, he pressed a mechadendrite to my forehead, and darkness claimed me. I awoke to pain. Not the sharp, clean pain of a knife or the burn of a brand, but something deeper, cellular, as though each atom of my body was being unmade and reforged. I was strapped to the metal table, my limbs secured with bonds that appeared to be made from some strange alloy that shifted between solid and liquid. Around me, other serfs screamed. Those who could still scream. Some had their mouths sewn shut with cables that pulsed with unnatural light. Others had been partially disassembled, their organs removed and floating in fields of energy beside them while dark mechanicum priests tinkered with their innards. The priest attending me noticed my consciousness returning. His face was largely hidden by a respirator mask, adorned with small tentacles that twitched and curled as he spoke. "The old implants have accepted the new material," he said, not to me but to a servitor that hovered nearby, recording his words. Subject shows remarkable compatibility with the warp-infused augmentations, likely due to extended exposure to immaterium energies during service. I tried to speak, but found my jaw locked in place. Metal plates had been grafted to my jawbone, fusing with the existing augmentations. I could feel similar modifications across my body, new implants meshing with the old, creating something neither fully human nor fully machine. "You are fortunate, serf," the priest continued, now addressing me directly. "Your long service has prepared your flesh for what comes next. Many do not survive the first phase, but you, I think, will endure to serve the Black Legion." He stepped back, revealing the changes to my body. My chest had been opened and reinforced with a cage of dark metal. My organs pulsed with an unnatural light, similar to the cables silencing the other serfs. Most disturbing were my arms, now elongated and tipped with slender metal fingers designed for the most delicate work on Astartes' armor. "The physical enhancement is only the beginning," the priest said. "Now comes the true transformation, the breaking of chains." He reached up and adjusted something on the machinery above the table. The energy arcs intensified, focusing into a single beam that struck my forehead. Pain gave way to something far worse. My memories began to play before my eyes, not as I recalled them, but twisted, corrupted. I saw myself serving the lunar wolves during the Great Crusade, but now the glory I had once perceived was replaced with horror. The planets we brought into compliance were not liberated but enslaved. The warriors I had revered were not heroes but monsters, butchering innocence for the pleasure of a false emperor. I tried to reject these visions, knowing them to be untrue. But the machine burrowed deeper, finding the foundations of my loyalty and corroding them. Wherever my memories contained pride in the Legion, the machine inserted doubt. Wherever there was love for my masters, it planted seeds of resentment. Wherever there was faith in our purpose, it cultivated nihilism. I do not know how long this process continued. Time loses all meaning when your very identity is being surgically altered. I remember fragments, the dark mechanicum priest replacing parts of my brain with cybernetic components that throbbed with warp energy. Serfs around me dying as their minds rejected the reprogramming. The growing emptiness inside me as my old self was methodically erased. When I was finally released from the table, I was no longer Garan Vale, loyal serf of the Lunar Wolves. That identity had been burned away, leaving only a shell of flesh and metal ready to be filled with new purpose. The next phase of our transformation took place in chambers deep within the vengeful spirit, where the boundary between material and immaterial was at its thinnest. Here, the Black Legion conducted the rituals that would bind us to their cause not just in body, but in soul. We processed serfs were led in groups of 20 to circular chambers whose walls were inscribed with symbols that changed when not observed directly. At the center of each chamber stood a black legionnaire, one of Abaddon's chosen, wearing armor that seemed to drink the light. The warrior in our chamber removed his helmet, revealing a face that had once been human but had long since surrendered to the touch of the warp. His skin was pale as death, stretched tight over features too perfect to be natural. His eyes were solid black, reflecting nothing. "I am Vorash Thricebound," he announced, his voice resonating unnaturally in the chamber. "Champion of the Black Legion and servant of the Despoiler. Today, you will renounce your past and embrace the future Abaddon offers. Today, you will be unmade and reforged." He gestured, and from alcoves around the chamber emerged robed figures carrying daggers of black glass. They moved among us, pressing the blades to our foreheads, drawing blood that did not flow down but instead hovered in the air before our eyes. "Witness your past," Vorash commanded. In the floating droplets of blood, I saw images form. Myself as a child on Terra, my selection by the lunar wolves, the long millennia of service. But these images were different from my memories, corrupted further than even the dark Mechanicum's machines had managed. In these visions, I was not a loyal serf but a slave, broken and bitter, secretly hating my masters even as I served them. "This is the truth your blood reveals," Vorash said. "The chains you have carried, the resentment you buried. Abaddon offers freedom from these lies. Renounce them. Renounce your past." "I renounce it," I heard myself say, though I had not consciously chosen to speak. The words were pulled from me by the ritual, by the changes already made to my mind. The robed figures moved again, this time slicing our palms and collecting the blood in small black chalices. They mixed our blood with other substances, dark liquids and powders that bubbled and smoked when combined. "Drink," Vorash ordered. "Drink and be reborn." The chalice was pressed to my lips. The liquid burned like acid, searing my throat and spreading fire through my veins. Around me, other serfs collapsed, their bodies convulsing as the mixture took effect. Some simply died, their forms dissolving into pools of bubbling flesh. Others transformed, their humanity slipping away as mutation claimed them. I remained standing, though every nerve in my body screamed. The augmentations performed by the Dark Mechanicum were responding to the mixture, integrating it into my system rather than being destroyed by it. I could feel my consciousness expanding, connecting to something larger, a network of minds, all bound to the same purpose. Through this connection, I sensed Abaddon for the first time, not directly, not as a presence in my mind, but as a gravitational pull on my thoughts, a black sun around which my new existence would orbit. His will became an undercurrent to my own, suggesting rather than commanding, but irresistible nonetheless. When the ritual was complete, only 7 of the 20 serfs in our group remained alive. We were no longer purely human, our forms altered by both technology and warp energy. Our skin had taken on a pallid hue, similar to the color of the legion we had once served, but now symbolizing our rebirth rather than our decay. Vorash looked upon us with his black eyes, satisfaction evident in his cruel features. "You have survived the first trials," he said. "Now you must prove your worth. Follow." We were led from the ritual chamber to a vast arena that had once been a primary launch bay. Here, hundreds of processed serfs like ourselves were gathered, standing in disciplined ranks despite the changes wrought upon their bodies. Before us was a raised dais, and upon it stood figures in armor of deepest black, captains of the Black Legion, the commanders of Abaddon's new force. Each bore weapons and armor that radiated malevolent power, gifts from the ruinous powers to those who had proven their dedication to the long war. At the center of the dais, Elevated above even these mighty warriors was a throne fashioned from the bones of fallen Astartes. Upon it sat a figure whose presence dominated the vast chamber. His armor was black like the others, but worked with gold that seemed alive, crawling across the ceramite like insects made of light. A great cloak of what appeared to be flayed skin hung from his massive shoulders, but most terrible was the weapon he held, a sword longer than a man is tall, its blade flickering with energies that did not belong in the material universe. Drachnien, the end of empires, the daemon sword of Abaddon the Despoiler. When he rose from the throne, every being in the chamber fell to their knees, including the Black Legion captains. Only I remained standing, not out of defiance but simple shock. I had seen the War Master himself in the early days, had witnessed Primarchs in their glory, but Abaddon radiated a different kind of power, not the genetic perfection of the Emperor's creations, but something earned through suffering and determination. He was more than a son of Horus. He was the heir to 10,000 years of hatred. A gauntleted hand gripped my shoulder, forcing me down. Vorash, ensuring I showed proper respect, my knees hit the deck with bruising force. The time of preparation is over. Abaddon's voice rolled across the gathered serfs and warriors. The same voice that had drawn us to the vengeful spirit, but now present in the flesh rather than transmitted psychically. The War Master is gone. The legion he created failed. But from its ashes, we shall rise stronger. We shall forge a brotherhood of the Black, united not by gene seed or Primarch, but by purpose. He descended from the dais, moving through the ranks of kneeling figures. Where he passed, warriors and serfs alike bowed their heads lower, none daring to meet his gaze. "Look around you," he commanded. "See your brothers, not lunar wolves, not sons of Horus, Black Legionnaires. Warriors and serfs united in the long war against the false emperor. The past is dead. Loyalty to the War Master is dead. There is only loyalty to the Legion, to me." He stopped before our group, his attention drawn perhaps by my earlier failure to kneel immediately. Up close, his presence was overwhelming. His face, visible beneath a top knot of black hair, bore the features of Horus, twisted by 10 millennia of war and hatred. His eyes blazed with inner fire, windows into a soul consumed by vengeance. "You think you know war," he said, addressing us directly. "You think you understand hatred. You remember the War Master and believe that memory gives you strength." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that nonetheless carried to every ear. "Memory is weakness. Hope is weakness. Faith is weakness. I shall burn these things from you until only rage remains." He straightened, addressing the entire gathering once more. "The trials begin now. Prove yourselves worthy of the Black Legion, or die in the attempt. There is no middle path." With these words, the vast bay doors of the launch bay opened, revealing the twisting unreality of the Eye of Terror beyond the ship's void shields. Without warning, the artificial gravity cut out. Hundreds of serfs and even some of the Black Legionnaires were sucked toward the opening before emergency force fields activated, stopping their momentum but leaving them suspended in zero gravity. "The weak will be culled," Abaddon declared as chaos erupted around us. "The strong will adapt." Vorash gripped my arm, his enhanced strength easily keeping me anchored despite the loss of gravity. "Your first trial," he said. "Survive." He released me, and I immediately began to drift toward the bay doors, along with dozens of other processed serfs. The force fields that had activated were not designed to protect us, but to create a contained arena in which we would fight for survival. In the zero-gravity environment, the changes made to our bodies by the dark mechanicum became clear advantages. My elongated metal-tipped fingers allowed me to grip the floating debris that filled the chamber. The implants in my muscles responded to the new conditions, adjusting my movements to account for the lack of gravity. Around me, other serfs struggled. Those without extensive augmentation flailed uselessly. Some collided with debris and were impaled or crushed. Others drifted into the waiting blades of black legionnaires who hovered at the edges of the field, culling the weak with methodical precision. I pulled myself from handhold to handhold, avoiding the worst of the debris field. My mind, partially merged with the machine systems of the vengeful spirit, could anticipate the movement patterns, giving me precious seconds of advantage. I was not alone in this ability. Other serfs who had survived the processing were similarly navigating the chaos, their movements becoming more coordinated as they adjusted to their new capabilities. The trial lasted for hours. Gradually, the number of serfs diminished, either killed by the environment or executed by the watching legionnaires. Those of us who survived began to work together instinctively, forming small groups that improved our collective chances. Not out of compassion or loyalty, but out of the cold calculation that cooperation increased survival odds. By the time the bay doors closed and gravity was restored, dropping us unceremoniously to the deck, only about a third of the original serfs remained. We stood or lay where we had fallen, exhausted and changed by the experience. The surviving serfs now looked at each other differently, not as fellow servants but as competitors. Resources to be used or obstacles to be eliminated. Abaddon, who had watched the entire trial from his elevated position, descended once more to address the survivors. "You have passed the first trial," he said, "but it is merely the beginning. Now comes the true test of your devotion." At his signal, black legionnaires moved among us, separating us into groups based on criteria I did not understand. I found myself in a group of 12 serfs, all heavily augmented, all ancient in service. We were led from the launch bay to a smaller chamber that might once have been a reliquary. The walls were lined with display cases, most empty but some still containing fragments of armor or weapons from the Great Crusade era. In the center of the chamber stood my former master, Sargus. His armor was no longer bare ceramite but painted the deep black of the Black Legion, gold trim gleaming in the dim light. His helmet was removed, revealing a face I had served for millennia but now barely recognized. The features were the same, but the expression was alien. Where once there had been bitter determination, now there was fanatic purpose. "These are the ones?" he asked the legionnaire who had escorted us. "Yes, Brother Sargus," the 12 who remembered. My master, no Brother Sargus of the Black Legion, studied us with eyes that held no recognition. "I too remembered," he said after a moment. "I remembered glory that never existed, victory that turned to ash, a war master who failed us all." He gestured, and from alcoves around the chamber emerged more black legionnaires, each bearing instruments that were part weapon, part surgical tool. "Memory is the enemy of rebirth," Sargus continued. "So long as you remember who you were, you cannot become what you must be." The black legionnaires moved among us, pressing the instruments to our foreheads. I felt a burning sensation as something breached my skull, followed by a cold numbness that spread through my mind. "I shall take your memories," Sargus said, "all that you were, all that you served, and in return, I give you purpose." The instrument burrowed deeper, and I felt my consciousness begin to fragment. Memories that had survived even the Dark Mechanicum's reprogramming were being extracted, pulled from my mind like teeth from a jaw. My childhood on Terra, my selection by the Lunar Wolves. The face of the Emperor, glimpsed once during a triumph. The glory of the Great Crusade. The horror of the heresy. The long millennia of service to a legion without purpose. As these memories were torn away, they were replaced with new ones. Not false memories, but rather interpretations. Seeds planted in the fertile ground of my emptied mind. The Emperor as tyrant. Horus as failed savior. Abaddon as the true heir to the long war. the Black Legion as the only path to vengeance. I fought against this invasion, this rewriting of my very identity, but the changes already made to my body and mind had weakened my resistance. The augmentations of the Dark Mechanicum, the blood ritual conducted by Vorash, the trial in the launch bay, each had stripped away a layer of my old self, preparing me for this final transformation. One by one, my fellow serfs underwent the same process. Some died, their minds unable to withstand the extraction. Others emerged, changed, their eyes vacant, their expressions serene with newfound purpose. I was somewhere in between, neither fully converted nor entirely myself. When the procedure was complete, Sargus approached me directly. He studied my face with clinical detachment, searching for signs of the serf he had once owned. "Do you remember me, Garenvale?" he asked. I tried to recall, but the memories were fragmented, distorted. "You were my master," I said, the words feeling strange on my tongue. "In the old Legion. And what do you feel toward me now?" I searched my emotions, finding them altered. The reverence and fear I had once felt toward the Astartes had been replaced with something colder. Respect for his power, but not subservience. "Nothing, Lord," I answered truthfully. "You are a warrior of the Black Legion, as I shall be a servant of the Black Legion. Our past connection means nothing." Sargus nodded, satisfied. "The extraction was not complete in your case. Fragments remain, but they are no longer chains, merely echoes." He placed a hand on my shoulder, the weight of it nearly driving me to my knees. "Now you must choose, Garenvale. Serve the Black Legion with what remains of your soul, or die with your memories intact." The choice was presented as a true one, not merely rhetoric. I could feel it, a genuine moment of decision amidst the coercion and reprogramming. Perhaps the final test, to see if I would willingly surrender the last fragments of myself. I knelt before Sargus, head bowed. "I choose to serve," I said. The words came easily, without the inner resistance I might have expected. The changes to my mind had done their work well. "Then rise, servant of the Black," Sargus commanded. "Your old life ends today. Your new purpose begins." I rose, feeling a strange lightness. The burden of millennia of memories had been lifted, leaving space for new purpose to take root. I was still Garenvale in name, but that name had been emptied of meaning. I was a vessel, now, ready to be filled with Abaddon's will. The final phase of our transformation took place in the heart of the vengeful spirit, in chambers that had once belonged to the War Master himself. Here, where the veil between realities was thinnest, we would be bound to the Black Legion not just in mind and body, but in soul. The surviving serfs, now numbering less than 100, were brought to a vast circular chamber whose architecture defied conventional physics. Pillars rose to a ceiling that seemed to contain the void itself, stars and nebulae visible in its impossible depths. The floor was not metal but a reflective black substance that rippled like liquid despite supporting our weight. In the center of the chamber stood a circle of Black Legionnaires, each bearing a staff topped with the 8-pointed star of Chaos Undivided. They chanted in a language that hurt the ears and mind to hear, their voices creating patterns in the air that writhed like living things. Within their circle stood Abaddon the Despoiler. He had removed his armor, revealing a body that was a monument to 10,000 years of war. His skin was a web of scars and warp marks, each telling the story of a battle or a pact. The talon of Horus, his infamous lightning claw, remained fused to his left arm, the golden metal seeming to merge with his flesh at the elbow. Drachnien, his daemon sword, was plunged into the liquid floor before him, its blade pulsing with hungry light. The final binding, Abaddon's voice rolled across the chamber. "The forging of the Black Legion continues. Who shall be bound to our purpose? Who shall serve the long war? We shall serve, The processed serfs responded as one, our voices blending in unnatural harmony. The words came unbidden, pulled from us by the ritual already in progress. Abaddon drew a black knife across his palm, black blood welling from the wound. "Blood of the Legion," he intoned, allowing the vitae to drip into the liquid floor. Where it touched, the surface hissed and steamed, patterns spreading outward like frost across glass. "Flesh of the Legion," Abaddon continued, tearing a strip of skin from his forearm without flinching. He cast it into the spreading pattern, where it dissolved, the patterns absorbing it and growing more complex. "Soul of the Legion." Abaddon raised Drachnien from the floor, the blade trailing tendrils of the liquid surface. He turned the weapon, pressing its point to his own chest just above the heart. For a moment, I thought he meant to impale himself in some final sacrifice. Instead, he pushed just enough to draw blood, which flowed down the blade in rivulets that seemed to move with purpose rather than gravity. "With blood, flesh, and soul, I bind you to the Black Legion," Abaddon declared. "Not as slaves, but as weapons, not as servants, but as instruments of vengeance. The chains of loyalty to dead masters are broken. Now you forge new chains, chains of your own choosing, chains that bind you to our purpose." The liquid floor beneath our feet began to rise, tendrils of the black substance snaking up our legs, cold as void ice against our skin. Where it touched, it burned, searing patterns into our flesh that matched those spreading from Abaddon's blood. "The mark of the Black Legion," Vorash whispered beside me, his voice filled with reverent awe. "The touch of the despoiler himself." The pain was exquisite, beyond anything I had experienced in my long existence. It penetrated beyond physical sensation, reaching into the core of my being. I felt my soul being inscribed with the same patterns that marked my flesh, binding me to the Black Legion on a level more fundamental than mere loyalty or obedience. Around me, other serfs screamed or collapsed, their bodies and minds unable to withstand the ritual. The black tendrils consumed these failures utterly, leaving nothing behind, not even ash. A sacrifice to complete the binding of those strong enough to survive. I remained, standing, though every instinct demanded I fall. The augmentations from the dark mechanicum thrummed with power, drawing strength from the warp energies saturating the chamber. My altered mind processed the pain, compartmentalizing it, using it as fuel rather than allowing it to overwhelm me. When the ritual reached its crescendo, Abaddon raised Drachnien high, the blade now running with mixed blood, his and ours. "The Legion is reborn," he proclaimed, "no longer bound by legacy or blood, but by will and purpose. The Black Legion rises. Let the galaxy tremble." The circle of Black Legionnaires struck their staffs against the floor in unison, sending a shockwave of power through the chamber. The liquid floor solidified instantly, the patterns within it becoming permanent, matching those now burned into our flesh and souls. Less than 30 serfs remained standing when the ritual concluded. We were changed, fundamentally and irreversibly. Our skin bore the black patterns of our binding, visible beneath the surface like veins of dark metal running through pale flesh. Our eyes reflected the same hungry light that emanated from Drachnien. Our souls no longer belonged entirely to ourselves. "You are no longer serfs," Abaddon addressed us. "You are the bound, the instruments through which the Black Legion extends its will. You shall maintain our weapons, tend our armor, record our victories, and witness our ascension. And when we finally stand victorious over the corpse of the false emperor, you shall be there to record his last breath." He gestured to the Black Legionnaires who had conducted the ritual. "Take them to their duties. The preparations for our first campaign begin now." We were led from the ritual chamber, our new status immediately apparent in how the Legionnaires treated us. Not with respect, perhaps, but with recognition of our place in the hierarchy of the Black Legion. We were no longer expendable servants but valuable instruments, extensions of Abaddon's will. I was assigned to the armory, my augmented hands perfectly suited for the maintenance of war gear. The forges of the vengeful spirit were vast complexes, combining traditional metallurgy with warp craft and dark mechanicum technology. Here, the armor and weapons of the Black Legion were maintained, repaired, and enhanced. My first task was the preparation of armor for the warriors who had once formed my master's warband. Their pale green and white heraldry was being systematically erased, replaced with the midnight black and burning gold of the Black Legion. I worked alongside other bound, our movements synchronized by the subtle connection we now shared through our binding to Abaddon. Time passed strangely in the eye of terror, doubly so within the vengeful spirit. What seemed like weeks might have been days or months. We worked without rest, our augmented bodies requiring little sleep, our altered minds focused solely on our tasks. The forge never cooled, the work never ceased. The Black Legion was preparing for war. During this time, I occasionally saw my former master, now Brother Sargus of the Black Legion. He no longer acknowledged me personally, seeing me as simply one of the bound. The connection of millennia of service had been severed, replaced by our new roles in Abaddon's hierarchy. This should have troubled me, perhaps, but the extraction of my memories had removed much of the emotional significance of our relationship. One day, which was marked only by a shift in duties rather than any true passage of time, I was summoned from the forges. A Black Legionnaire whose armor marked him as one of Abaddon's chosen Ezekarian, the inner circle of the despoiler, came to the armory. "You." He pointed at me with a gauntlet inscribed with sorcerous runes. "Garan Vale, the despoiler requires your service." I set aside the plasma incinerator I had been calibrating and followed without question. The binding ritual had ensured compliance, but even without it, curiosity would have compelled me. Direct service to Abaddon was a distinction few of the bound could claim. I was led through sections of the vengeful spirit I had not seen before. Chambers where reality seemed particularly thin, where whispers followed our passage and shadows moved independent of any light source. The deeper we traveled, the more the vessel resembled a living thing rather than a construct of metal and machinery. Finally, we reached a sealed door guarded by two Terminators in black armor so heavy it seemed impossible they could move. Their helmets were fashioned in the image of demonic entities, leering faces with horns and fangs that appeared to shift when viewed from different angles. They carried halberds that crackled with energy, that left burning after images in the air. The bound one, as requested, my guide informed them. The Terminators studied me with glowing red eye lenses, then stepped aside in perfect unison. The door behind them opened, revealing a chamber that defied comprehension. It appeared to be a strategium, with a great circular table at its center displaying hololithic projections of star systems and fleet movements. But the technology was melded seamlessly with organic components that pulsed with life. The walls were lined with what looked like cogitators, but which breathed and occasionally blinked with eyes that formed and dissolved in their surfaces. Around the table stood figures of power and dread. Captains of the Black Legion, lords of war who had fought across 10,000 years of the Long War. Sorcerers whose armor was inscribed with formulae that hurt the mind to look upon directly. Warriors whose bodies had been blessed or cursed by the ruinous powers, with mutations that enhanced their already transhuman abilities. And at the head of the table, dominating the gathering by his presence alone, Abaddon the Despoiler, fully armored now, his Terminator plate making him a giant even among the transhuman. Astartes. Drachnian was sheathed at his side, but the sword's malevolent presence could still be felt, a pressure against the soul of every being in the chamber. "The bound one arrives," Abaddon noted, his voice carrying easily over the murmur of conversation among his captains. "Approach, Garan Vale." I moved forward, keeping my head bowed as protocol demanded. Though we were no longer serfs in the traditional sense, the bound still observed the proper forms of respect toward the Astartes, particularly toward the despoiler himself. "You served the Legion since Terra," Abaddon stated. Not a question, but I confirmed it nonetheless. "Yes, Lord." "You witnessed the glory of the Great Crusade, the treachery of the Emperor, the fall of the War Master." Again, not questions, statements of fact that he already knew to be true. "Yes, Lord," I repeated. "And yet your memories of these events have been extracted, the chains of the past broken. What remains in their place?" This was a true question, and one that required careful thought. I examined my fragmented recollections, finding them altered, recontextualized by the procedures I had undergone. "Purpose, Lord," I answered finally. "The memory of events remains, but the meaning has changed. I see now that the Emperor was never divine, merely powerful, that Horus was a tool who outlived his usefulness, that the true path forward lies with the Black Legion. With you." Abaddon studied me, his burning gaze seeming to pierce through flesh and bone to examine my soul directly. Whatever he sought, he appeared to find it satisfactory. "The bound speak truth, even when that truth is manufactured," he said, addressing his captains rather than me. "This one shall serve as the Legion's memory, a witness to our ascension who has also witnessed our lowest point. Through his eyes, the galaxy shall see the inevitability of our victory." He turned his attention back to me. "You shall record our campaigns, every victory, every setback, every step on the path to Terra, not as propaganda, but as testament. The truth of the Black Legion, written by one who remembers what came before." I bowed deeper. "I am honored, Lord." "Honor is a concept for loyalists," Abaddon dismissed. "You serve because you have no choice, because your soul is bound to mine as surely as your flesh is bound to the Legion, but in that service you shall find the freedom that was promised, freedom from the lies of the past." He gestured to one of the sorcerers, a figure whose armor was adorned with scrolls of human skin covered in microscopic script. "Karnis shall provide you with the tools needed for your task. When the Terminum Crusade begins, you will accompany my command group. You will witness, you will record. You will ensure that the rebirth of the Black Legion is remembered for all time." With that, I was dismissed from the despoiler's presence. The sorcerer, Karnis, led me from the strategium to his personal chambers within the vengeful spirit. Unlike the organic-mechanical hybrid nature of much of the vessel, Karnis's domain was almost clinical in its precision. Shelves lined with tomes and scrolls filled the space, each secured behind stasis fields that shimmered with protective energies. "The despoiler sees potential in you," Karnis said, his voice distorted by the vox grill of his helmet. "Few of the bound are granted such distinction." "I served faithfully for millennia," I replied. "Faithfulness is not the quality he values," Karnis countered. "It is your capacity for reinterpretation. You do not merely accept the new truth we have placed within you. You synthesize it with the fragments that remain, creating a narrative that serves our purpose better than complete indoctrination ever could." He moved to a sealed cabinet, pressing his gauntleted hand against a panel that scanned him with a beam of sickly green light. The cabinet opened, revealing items that radiated power even to my limited senses. "These shall be your tools," Karnis said, removing the items one by one. First was a book bound in what appeared to be ceramite, its cover unmarked, but for the 8-pointed star of chaos undivided. "The Liber Tenebris," Karnis explained. "Its pages are crafted from the psychically active skin of astropaths. What you record within it will be preserved against time and warp alike." Next came a stylus fashioned from a material I did not recognize, black as the void but with a subtle iridescence that shifted as it moved. Forged from the crystallized blood of a daemon prince, Canis said. "It will draw upon your own vitae when you write, binding your words to reality through sacrifice." Finally, he presented a collar of black metal that pulsed with inner light. "This will enhance your perception, allow you to see events from multiple perspectives simultaneously, to record not just what happens, but the meaning behind it. The currents of fate that flow through every battle." I accepted each item with appropriate reverence, understanding that they were more than mere tools. They were extensions of the Black Legion's will, conduits through which my new purpose would be realized. "When do we depart?" I asked, securing the items within the robes I had been given as one of the bound. "The muster has already begun," Canis replied. "The war bands that have sworn allegiance to the despoiler gather as we speak. Soon, the Black Legion will launch its first campaign as a unified force. The Terminum Crusade will announce our rebirth to a galaxy that thought us defeated." In the days that followed, I witnessed the gathering of what would become the most feared fighting force in the galaxy. Warbands of former sons of Horus arrived at the Vengeful Spirit, their warriors undergoing the same transformations I had observed with my former master's group. Other legions came as well, traitors who saw in Abaddon a leader worthy of their allegiance. Word-bearers bringing their dark faith. Iron warriors with their siege expertise. Night Lords with their mastery of terror. Even members of the Death Guard and Thousand Sons, whose loyalties to their own primarchs had perhaps wavered, all underwent the rituals that would bind them to the Black Legion. All surrendered their old colors and heraldry for the midnight black and burning gold of Abaddon's new force. All broke the chains of their past and forged new ones, chains of choice rather than inheritance. I recorded it all in the Liber Tenebris, the stylus drawing blood from my fingertips as I wrote, the collar allowing me to perceive the significance beneath the surface of events. I documented the forging of the Black Legion with the dispassion of one whose emotions had been largely excised, but with the context of one who remembered what had come before. When the fleet finally departed the Vengeful Spirit, breaking from the region of the Eye of Terror where Abaddon had gathered his forces, I stood on the observation deck of the Despoiler's flagship. The collar around my neck allowed me to see the immaterium as the ships transitioned, the swirling madness of the warp reaching out with hungry tendrils to caress the vessels that dared to traverse it. Beside me stood Brother Sargus, once my master but now simply another warrior of the Black Legion. He too watched the transition, his expression hidden behind his helmet but his posture suggesting anticipation. "Does anything remain of who you were?" he asked suddenly, not looking at me. The question surprised me. Such personal inquiries were rare among the Black Legion, where the past was deliberately forgotten. "Fragments," I admitted. "Impressions rather than true memories. The knowledge of events without the emotional context." "Good," Sargus said. "That is as it should be. I remember nothing of who I was. Only brief flashes, like scenes from another man's life. It is better this way." "And yet you ask the question," I noted. "Some part of you seeks connection to the past." Sargus turned to me then, his helmet's eye lenses glowing with inner fire. "Not connection. Confirmation. Assurance that the chains are truly broken, that when we face the Imperium, there will be no hesitation, no lingering sentiment for what we once served." "There will be none," I assured him. "The binding ritual saw to that. We serve the Black Legion now, the Long War, the Despoiler." Sargus nodded once, then turned back to the viewport. "Record that, Chronicler. Record that when the moment came, we did not look back, we embraced the Black." And so I did, adding his words to the growing testament within the Liber Tenebris. The testament of a legion reborn not through gene seed or primarch, but through will and purpose. A legion freed from the failures of the past, unified in its dedication to vengeance against the Imperium of man. The Terminum Crusade was to be the Black Legion's announcement to the galaxy, a series of devastating raids against imperial worlds on the fringes of what had once been segmentum obscurus. Planets that had known relative peace for millennia, their defenses neglected due to their distance from the Eye of Terror. We emerged from the warp into the terminum system, a cluster of 7 inhabited worlds orbiting a dying star. The system was barely defended, its PDF forces equipped with outdated weapons, its orbital platforms staffed by reservists rather than dedicated naval personnel. It was perfect prey for a legion seeking to build momentum through victory. The Black Legion struck without warning or mercy. Drop pods and assault craft launched from our vessels before the Imperial forces could even raise the alarm. Terminators teleported directly into command centers, slaughtering leadership before they could organize a response. Sorcerers summoned warp storms that isolated the system from potential reinforcement. I accompanied the command squad led by Karnis, the sorcerer who had provided me with my chronicler's tools. From a gunship hovering above the capital city of Terminum Prime, I witnessed the methodical destruction wrought by the Black Legion. Buildings toppled under artillery fire. Streets ran with blood as civilians were herded into great processing centers. The planetary governor's palace was transformed into a temple to the ruinous powers, its spires now adorned with the flayed bodies of its former occupants. Through it all, I recorded. The stylus drew blood from my fingers as I wrote, the sacrifice binding my words to reality, ensuring that what I witnessed would be preserved with perfect clarity. The collar around my neck allowed me to see beyond the physical, to witness the currents of fate and the attention of the dark gods as they turned their gaze upon this first campaign of their new champions. The Black Legion fought not as a rabble of warbands but as a disciplined force. The rituals that had bound us together, that had forged new chains of allegiance, proved their worth on the battlefield. Warriors who had once served different legions, different primarchs, now fought as brothers, united by their shared purpose and the will of Abaddon. By the 3rd day of the invasion, Terminum Prime had fallen completely. The Black Legion's banners hung from every tower and spire, the 8-pointed star proclaiming the new masters of the world. The population had been either slaughtered or enslaved, with the strongest and most promising inducted into cults that would provide recruits for the Legion's mortal auxiliaries. It was then that Abaddon himself made planetfall. The despoiler had remained aboard the Vengeful Spirit during the initial assault, directing the broader campaign across the system. Now, with victory assured, he came to claim his triumph personally. I stood among the honor guard that greeted his Thunderhawk as it descended to the blasted parade ground before the governor's palace. The warriors of the Black Legion knelt as one as Abaddon emerged, his Terminator armor making him a giant even among the transhuman Astartes. Drachnian was drawn and held point down before him, the daemon sword drinking in the suffering that saturated the conquered world. "Rise, warriors of the Black Legion," Abaddon commanded. "Rise and witness the first fruit of our rebirth." The Black Legionnaires stood, their armor still bearing the marks of battle but their posture proud. They had proven themselves worthy of the colors they now wore. They had broken the chains of the past and forged new ones, chains of victory rather than defeat. Abaddon ascended the steps of the palace, now a temple to darkness, and turned to address his legion and their mortal thralls. I moved closer, the collar around my neck, pulsing as it enhanced my senses to capture every word and gesture for the chronicle. "Let this world serve as testament." Abaddon's voice rolled across the gathering, supernaturally powerful even without amplification. "Testament that the long war continues, that the Imperium's sins have not been forgotten, that vengeance comes for the false emperor, one world at a time." He raised Drachnian, the blade flaring with unnatural light that cast his shadow across the entire plaza. The sons of Horus died with the War Master, the Lunar Wolves died on Istvan, but the Black Legion is born here, in fire and blood, born of choice rather than gene seed, born of purpose rather than primarch. We are the heirs of hatred, the inheritors of the long war, and we shall not be denied our vengeance." The legionnaires roared their approval, the sound echoing across the ruined city. The mortal cultists prostrated themselves, overcome by the presence of their dark messiah. And I recorded it all, my fingers bleeding onto the pages of the Liber Tenebris as the stylus moved with supernatural speed. When the address concluded, Abaddon descended from the temple steps and moved among his warriors, acknowledging their victories, cementing their loyalty with personal recognition. He eventually came to where I stood, the Liber open in my hands, its pages stained with my blood and filled with my testimony. "Show me, chronicler," he commanded. I presented the book, holding it open for his inspection. Abaddon studied the pages, his burning gaze scanning the words I had recorded. A satisfied smile crossed his features, visible beneath his top knot of black hair. "You have captured it well," he said. "Not merely the events, but their meaning. The birth of a legion without chains." "The binding ritual ensures accuracy, Lord," I replied. "I see with eyes unclouded by sentiment or bias." "No," Abaddon corrected, "not unclouded, merely clouded differently, the bias of the Black Legion rather than the bias of the past. There is no true objectivity, chronicler, only perspective. And your perspective now serves the long war." He reached out with his right hand, the one not replaced by the talon of Horus, and touched the page I had been writing. His armored finger came away stained with my blood, which he then pressed to his own forehead, leaving a crimson mark between his eyes. "Blood binds us," he said. "Not the blood of gene seed or Primarch, the blood we shed, the blood we spill, the blood we offer to the long war. Remember that, chronicler. Record it for all who follow." "I shall, Lord," I promised, adding his words to the chronicle even as he spoke them. Abaddon nodded once, then turned to Canis, who had approached during our exchange. "Prepare the rituals. This world shall be our first offering." A declaration of intent that even the blind seers of terror cannot ignore. Canis bowed deeply. "It shall be done, Despoiler. The coordinates are already being inscribed. The sacrifice is prepared." I did not understand their meaning then, but I would soon witness the true purpose of the Terminum Crusade. Not merely conquest or plunder, but something far more significant. A statement written in the language of atrocity that the Imperium could not fail to comprehend. In the days that followed, the Black Legion's hold on the Terminum system was consolidated. The remaining resistance was crushed with methodical efficiency. The population was either processed into slaves or sacrificed in great rituals that stained the skies with blood and souls. And beneath it all, a greater working took shape. Canis and his fellow sorcerers directed the construction of vast symbols across the surface of each conquered world. Trenches filled with promethium and the bodies of sacrifices formed patterns visible from orbit, 8-pointed stars, and other more esoteric shapes whose meaning escaped even my enhanced perception. I recorded it all, my understanding growing as the pattern of the ritual revealed itself. This was to be a sacrifice on a planetary scale. 7 worlds devoted to the ruinous powers, their deaths a beacon that would announce the birth of the Black Legion to powers both mortal and divine. On the final day, I stood once more at Abaddon's side as he overlooked the primary ritual site from the bridge of the Vengeful Spirit. The great vessel had moved into low orbit over Terminum Prime, its shadow casting the already blighted world into deeper darkness. "Witness, chronicler," Abaddon commanded. "Witness and record the true birth of the Black Legion." At his signal, Canis and his conclave of sorcerers began the final incantation. From orbit, I could see the patterns on the surface of the world ignite, burning with supernatural intensity. The flames spread along the prepared channels, linking the ritual sites across continents and oceans. Similar conflagrations erupted on the other 6 worlds of the system, visible even at this distance as pinpricks of malevolent light. The bridge of the vengeful spirit darkened as power was drawn from its systems to fuel the ritual. Abaddon stood unflinching, Drachnian drawn and held before him, the daemon sword drinking in the energies that flowed through the chamber. The black legionnaires around him knelt in positions of supplication, their armor resonating with the building power. Then came the moment of culmination. Karnis raised his staff, now glowing with power that threatened to consume the sorcerer himself, and brought it down with terrible finality. The impact sent a psychic shockwave through the immaterium that even I, with my limited sensitivity, could perceive. The surface of Terminum Prime ruptured as the ritual reached its peak. Great fissures opened across the planet, revealing not molten core but something far more terrible. The raw stuff of the warp boiled upward, consuming everything it touched. The other worlds of the system suffered similar fates, each dying in a unique agony determined by which of the ruinous powers claimed the sacrifice. In less than an hour, 7 inhabited worlds were transformed into daemon worlds, their realities fundamentally altered by the ritual. The Terminum system was no longer part of the material universe in any meaningful sense. It had become an extension of the Eye of Terror, a wound in reality that would never heal. "It is done," Abaddon declared, sheathing Drachnian as the ritual concluded. "The chains of the past are truly broken. The Black Legion is born." He turned to me, his burning gaze penetrating to the core of my being. "Record it thus, chronicler. On this day, by the sacrifice of 7 worlds, the Black Legion declared its independence from the shadow of the War Master. No longer sons of a fallen demigod, but masters of our own fate. The long war enters a new phase, and the false emperor shall tremble at our coming." I wrote his words in the Liber Tenebris, the blood from my fingers now flowing freely, soaking the pages but somehow not obscuring the text. The collar around my neck burned hot against my skin, channeling perceptions beyond mortal comprehension into a form I could record. As the fleet departed the newly formed daemon worlds of the Terminum system, I stood once more on the observation deck. The collar allowed me to see the ripples our actions had sent through the immaterium. The attention of powers ancient and terrible now focused on the Black Legion with new interest. Brother Sargus joined me again, his armor bearing new battle honors from the campaign. "Do you understand now?" he asked. "Why the past had to die? Why memory is the enemy of rebirth?" I considered his question carefully. Through the lens of my new perspective, shaped by the extraction of my original memories and the binding ritual that had yoked my soul to the Black Legion, I could indeed see the logic, the necessity. "Yes," I answered. "The lunar wolves could never have done this. The sons of Horus would have been paralyzed by the shadow of their Primarch. Only by breaking those chains could the Black Legion be born." "And your chains, chronicler? Are they truly broken? You who were chosen to remember when the rest of us forgot?" It was an insightful question, one that probed at the contradiction of my role. I was the Legion's memory, yet memory was the enemy of rebirth. I was bound to record the past, while the Legion strived to escape it. "My chains are transformed," I said finally, "not broken but repurposed. I remember so that others need not. I carry the burden of the past, so that the Legion may focus solely on vengeance." Sargus nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Then record this truth as well. We are free now. Free as no other Legion can claim. Free of primogenitors and gene fathers. Free of legacy and expectation. Our only bonds are those we have chosen. Our only purpose, that which we have defined. Freedom through chosen bondage," I mused, the phrase appearing in the Liber Tenebris even as I spoke it. "Precisely," Sargus confirmed. "That is the paradox at the heart of the Black Legion. We have surrendered everything, even our past, even our identities. And in that surrender, we have found a liberty that the loyalist slaves of the Corpse Emperor can never know. As the vengeful spirit translated back into the warp, carrying the victorious Black Legion to its next campaign, I reflected on Sargas's words. There was truth in them, from a certain perspective, the perspective that had been implanted in my altered mind, the perspective of one who had given up everything that defined him in exchange for purpose. I ran my fingers across the collar around my neck, feeling the pulse of the energies contained within it. The collar that enhanced my perception while binding me to the Black Legion's will. Another paradox, another chain disguised as freedom. What remains of Garan Vale? I sometimes wonder, in the moments between campaigns when the collar's influence wanes slightly. The loyal serf who polished the same armor for 9 millennia, waiting for a purpose that never came. Is he truly gone, consumed by the rituals that forged the Black Legion's chronicler? Or does some fragment remain, buried beneath the layers of conditioning and warpcraft? I do not know. Perhaps it does not matter. Identity is a chain, as Abaddon teaches. Memory is a weakness. The only truth that matters is the long war, and my role in recording it for posterity. And yet, as I write these words in the Liber Tenebris, I cannot help but feel that the very act of chronicling creates a new kind of chain, a tether to the past that the Black Legion claims to have abandoned. Perhaps that is my true purpose, not merely to record, but to ensure that in its rush to break the chains of the past, the Legion does not forget the reasons for its hatred, the foundation of its vengeance. Freedom in the Black Legion means surrendering everything that was ever human. My humanity is long gone, sacrificed to the rituals that bound me to Abaddon's will. But in that surrender, I have gained a perspective that spans millennia. I have witnessed the death of one legion and the birth of another. I have seen warriors who once served a living god, now kneel before one of their own. I have recorded the transformation of hatred from personal grievance to eternal crusade. This is what it means to be recruited into the Black Legion, to be unmade and reforged, to surrender everything you were in exchange for purpose, to break the chains of the past only to forge new ones of your own choosing, to find freedom in submission to a cause greater than any individual. I am Garan Vale, once a serf of the Lunar Wolves, now chronicler of the Black Legion. The marks on my flesh are not scars, they are signatures, the signatures of those who remade me, who broke my chains and forged new ones, who gave me purpose when all seemed lost. And as the Black Legion continues its long war against the Imperium of Man, I shall be there to witness, to record, to ensure that when we finally stand victorious over the corpse of the false emperor, history will know the truth of our rebirth, the truth of our vengeance, the truth of our freedom. This is the testament of Garan Vale, chronicler of the Black Legion. Let all who read these words understand the price of true liberty, the surrender of self, the breaking of chains, the embrace of the Black.